So obviously, like, you know, after the Minoans, like we had the Mycenaeans, right? And then there's like the whole discovery of Troy and whatnot. And that's where like the whole like myth of Achilles comes in.
Yeah, I mean, discovery, you almost want to say the destruction of Troy. There's a famous, I
Yeah.
mean, just famously discovered by Heinrich Schliemann in the late 19th century. Very much not a traditional archaeologist, but there's a famous anecdote by one of my professors about Schliemann. He did more destruction to the walls of Troy than 10 years of the Mycenaeans besieging it. So Troy is
Well,
one of those places that you would love to go to because it's so prevalent in much of our mythology and history that I'm currently rereading the Iliad and Odyssey. So it's something to be there in person and to relive, even though it's very heavily passed down, even the mythology of this formerly destroyed multiple times over city that dominates our literature so much.
yeah, that was true. Fortunately, I had a cousin that actually did go to like the ruins of like where Troy was, and I believe that what he sent me back a picture of like the Trojan horse, which they obviously like not the original one, but they like had like a like they like basically rebuilt it in like in that image because obviously it was there, right? At least according to legend. So
Yeah, I mean that's if the fact that I mean you get a lot of those areas where they do those recreations. I think some of them are interesting. I mean, we have no description of what the Trojan horse looks like outside of just it's a horse on wheels and wood.
yeah,
But I mean, again, seeing that in person would be definitely something I'd like to put down on my bucket list.
yeah. So I was going to ask you, do you think that it was possible that Achilles was real or not?
That's a great question. With the historicity of the Iliad, there's always the question of, is this some sort of legend that was passed down over generations until the time of Homer, and whether Homer was actually a real person or not, that's another debate. Let's just say that there are some details of the Iliad and Odyssey that would indicate that some sort of cultural memory has been passed down. We have examples of there's a description of Homer of I believe it's Agamemnon who possesses a boar tusk helmet, which is a helmet that has like little almost scales made of boar tusks, and they have found evidence of this in Mycenaean ruins, so indicating that there's a correlation there. At the same time, this is written about 600 or orally composed some 600 years later by probably a combination of authors. Was there an event that probably saw the destruction of Troy, or what was, at the time Troy? Possibly, probably. How much we can actually attribute the descriptions of the destruction, or rather the stories of the Iliad and what's describing a Homeric society is like, it's probably more so going to be descriptive of the Greek Dark Ages when the poetry was written, rather than anything linking properly to the Bronze Age. But the connections are there. So I think there is a nugget of truth. But how much there actually is, we really don't know. And Homer, unfortunately, himself, or whoever they are, is a complete mystery as well. So tragically, we'll never be able to truly find out.
I mean, obviously, like I'm no historian, but one of my like personal theories is that um Achilles probably was real, but obviously the tale is just so exaggerated that like it's hard to like obviously you can't have like someone that's like indestructible. It was more so like what I feel like is that he was such a good warrior that that to see him like just fall, you know, was just like so impossible for the Greeks that they essentially had to like make a tale up for them to like say that, oh yeah, he fell because the whole river Styx story.
Well, the implication of, to the Greeks themselves, and referring to mainly the classical and Dark Ages and beyond, there was no doubt that Achilles existed, at least to them. Many people claimed ancestry to Achilles, Alexander the Great being one of them, and there are those parallels that strive, and very much Achilles himself is not necessarily a model of virtue in terms of morality or a classical hero in the traditional sense, but very
Yeah.
much so, if you're looking to be a warrior king and try to win your battles, then Achilles is the one to model yourself on.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned Alexander the Great, and I was actually reading up on it, and there's like supposedly that he visited the grave of Achilles and that he supposedly had like a shield of Achilles or an armor, I believe.
Yeah, but one of the many examples of antiquity of these sightseeing tours where,
Yeah,
as we mentioned earlier, with the rediscovery of Troy, Troy did exist in antiquity, and well, at least the site which the Greeks and Romans recognized as Troy. It's unlikely that he actually found some sort of surviving Bronze Age armor, but that's what he believed, and that's exactly it held significant symbolic power. Or it makes a good story, and that's why the historians preserved it, because it's fitting that the heir to Achilles is finding Achilles' armor, much like how the Greeks in the story of this Trojan cycle fought over Achilles' armor after his death. That's a pretty
yeah,
famous epic part of the cycle.
yeah. No, that's true.